2 weeks ago, I got an email, and it was actually pretty surprising. So I was curious and intrigued, and I'm going to walk you through it real quick. Let me share my screen here. Share. Here we go. We start with this cold email, and this person is pitching SIP trunks, and they've included their rates, and this was the body of the email. It was interesting to me because I couldn't figure out the math. That's one channel, 8 hours a day, 20 days a month, 9,600 minutes. So a SIP trunk, one channel, 9,600 minutes conservatively. At 850, I've got the wrong math in here, but 850 divided by 9,600 is actually this 0.00008. And this line right here, this would be 0.01 would be 1 penny. 0.008 is really, really aggressive. That can't possibly be right, can it? So I replied, does that include US 48 and CA 13? So this is code lingo for US 48 being the continental United States and CA 13 being the 13 Canadian provinces. This is pretty typical in North American voice traffic that includes US 48 and CA 13 and extended US, so Alaska, Hawaii, Caribbean would be a per minute rate. And so we get this email back, and the email comes back with a little bit more information, which is formatted a little bit better and some details. Peerless is not the provider. I think they're their underlying provider, and they're saying, oh, there's a little note here how you get DIDs, and look at this one. There's 1,000 free LD, so 1,000 free minutes, and a minimum of 5 SIP trunks required. So you're going to do 850 times 5 is your minimum. And I replied, hey, what is the per minute rate on this exactly? Because now I'm suspicious. And here's the catch. Once your 1,000 minutes are used up, you're going to pay 2.9 cents per minute. So this in notation would be 0.029. Now, let's talk about voice and SIP trunking for a second. SIP trunks are really just the methodology of connecting two voice systems together. You use SIP. Before that was H323. Everything is SIP today. Asterisk tried to start IX, and it went somewhere for a little while, and it was really about dealing with NAT-traversal, but it never got really super popular because the actual core telephony equipment used by phone companies are all SIP. So we have SIP. Anyways, so a SIP trunk is just really the ability for, two things to interconnect to each other and send voice traffic back and forth via SIP, okay? When you hear people talk about SIP trunks in terms of channels and number of channels, this is a billing construct now against voice. And there's lots of different ways of doing billing constructs. So you can do a SIP trunk where you say, I'm going to sell you 20 trunks and they're unlimited usage. And the provider at that point is making a bet that you are not going to exceed a profile of traffic on that SIP trunk, on that channel, outside of what they're assuming on their forecast. And the way this breaks down is you just saw math where I was calculating out to 9,600 minutes a month. You can skew this up a little bit and you can say, okay, if you're actually doing 12 hours, 6 days a week, what are the maximum number of minutes going to be? Or, you really, the provider should be looking at it across their existing customers and figure out what is and is not applicable to them, and what's a good benchmark for them to use. Old math we used to use for a knowledge worker inside of an enterprise sitting at a desk in a cubicle answering and making phone calls was 600 minutes a month per person. That's just another little tidbit to kind of keep in the back of your mind. So, it used to be popular, and SIP trunks, by the way, channelize this idea of like selling a channel of a SIP trunk comes back from selling PRIs. So if you were in a business selling PRIs, you were selling 23 channels at a time per PRI and then scaling up number of PRIs. Oh, you need to be able to make 40 simultaneous phone calls? Well, hey, guess what? That's 2 PRIs. There's an equipment limitation to how much calls the provider can manage based on the equipment that they have. So if they've licensed an SBC that has a set number of channels in their license, that limits them. But otherwise, there's no real limit in SIP trunking. You could have any amount of voice traffic that you have capacity on that circuit to provide. So, uncompressed, you're at 96 kilobits per call. So if you've got, if you think about that, if you've got a 100 meg circuit or a 1,000 meg circuit or a 10 gig circuit, you have lots and lots and lots and lots of voice calls that you can do on that internet connection. So doing a channelized SIP trunk deal where you're actually paying per interface or per channel is not really ideal. And the reason why this isn't ideal, and I'm going to use Twilio as an example here as I pull it up here. Let me do Twilio SIP trunk rates. So let me share the screen here and I'll navigate over to this thing. So here's Twilio's SIP trunk rates, and we'll just come here. Now, notice pay-as-you-go, calls per second, committed use discounts. They're going to tell you how many calls per second you can actually do, and there's going to be some caveats here. This is no channels, as many channels as you need. Just go out and use it, and you're going to pay 0.0053. So this is half of a penny per minute, and this is for US 48. So you can see here, Alaska, Hawaii, high cost zone, toll free, receiving calls, inbound, outbound. Now, I also want to tell you, Twilio is massively expensive. They're like 4 to 5x what you can get if you actually need to do this. So if you're doing a lot of voice traffic, you shouldn't be using Twilio in the first place. You should be using somebody that can actually deliver you high quality voice traffic at an appropriate cost. And we're doing these deals right now at 0.0010, 0.0012. This becomes volume dependent and some other nuances that factor in this scale. But just understand that Twilio is making a ton of money when they sell you anything on their services. Well, let me rephrase that. Twilio is not making any money right now. They're losing money hand over fist, but their margin on this product at 0.0053 is great. They're making 400%, right, on this actual service. Now, no cost per channel, as many channels as you need, get off and run, 0.0053 versus what this other person was trying to cold email and say, hey, buy a bunch of SIP trunks and pay us for the SIP trunks, and then also pay us for the usage on top of the SIP trunks. It's really old school telephony, and it's old school telecom mentality. And it's it was interesting. It seemed like a good deal up front, and then digging into it a little bit, it turned out to be not a good deal. And this is something that as you're provisioning services, and this really applies when we start talking about Microsoft Teams. So first off, almost every platform, and I'll use the trade terminology, so UCaaS and CCaaS. So Unified Communications as a Service platforms. So these are, Zoom, RingCentral, 8x8, Vonage, Dialpad, go down that list, or CCaaS, Contact Center as a Service providers. So, the UCaaS all have CCaaS. So like Vonage has theirs, RingCentral has theirs. Actually, RingCentral doesn't have theirs. They partner with NICE. Zoom has one, but they partner with Five9 as well. You see all these partnerships. But if you look at the CCaaS vendors, so Genesys, Five9, TalkDesk, go down this list of primary providers in the CCaaS space, as well as the UCaaS space, and you can start doing a bring your own telco, BYOT programs, where if you're big enough, you can pay them for the seats, but you can bring your own voice, and you can bring your own voice telephony. And so at certain scales, you'll understand where bringing your own voice provider actually makes sense. And the place that we see this most commonly right now is in the Microsoft Teams world. And so Microsoft popularized this with Direct Routing, and now we see Orchestrator Connect. And what Direct Routing and Orchestrator Connect really is, it's a certified service provider that went out and purchased a certified SBC. So this is an audio codes, Ribbon, I think Ribbon's probably the most common and most popular one. Audio codes is a huge one, SBCs for service providers. And if you're in the certified list for Microsoft, you can then go through the program and get certified and get listed as a Direct Routing or Orchestrator Connect partner. And Operator Connect, Orchestrator Connect, I don't know. It's gonna be wrong. OC partner, and then you can start selling voice minutes. Well, and again, you're going to see most providers out there in market that are selling direct routing or OC connections for Microsoft are doing it as a named user basis. So maybe they're going to sell you, a $8 seat, $8 per month voice enablement. So you hear people talk about like the race to zero in Microsoft Teams and voice. It's not a race to zero. If I just told you that the average consumption of voice for an enterprise user at a cubicle was 600 minutes a month, and they're selling it to you for $8, what's that math work out to? It's 0.013. It's 1.3 cents per minute. If the service provider's cost per minute 0.001, let's just call there's a huge margin still built into that business. Now there's lots of other things that you have to do that the service provider has to account for, right? You have to account for the cost of certification, what your equipment costs, your SBC cost, your R&D work, your software platform to maintain that interaction and API with Microsoft, your customer service cost, your sales costs, marketing costs, all these other things that build into your SG&A you have to account for. And when you're selling something that is being expressed in fractions of a cent per minute, even if you're selling, 100 million minutes a month worth of traffic, if you have 100 million minute per month business and you're making 0.1 cent per minute, that 100 million minutes turns into $100,000. That's not a lot of money and revenue off these businesses. So the name of the game within the voice world becomes scale and efficiency. How much can you scale? How efficient are you? How big are you? And generally speaking, when you're talking with voice companies, what you're trying to suss out, because they can hide this very easily, is where do they sit in the stack? What I mean by that is at the bottom of the stack, you actually have the PSTN. You have the real phone companies. So this is the AT&T, this is Verizon, this is Lumen in certain markets. So you have the actual phone company that provides the wires that go into buildings. And then you have the wireless provider, who's actually, so Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, who actually has the subscribers on these on the subscribers, the actual users. So now, if you're not doing business directly with the phone company doesn't want to do business with 100 million people. Like, it's inefficient for them. So what do? They start selling service to what you would call like an aggregator or wholesaler. So, and it used to be a CLEC was the big providers and the big aggregators and the big. So now you classify, you say like Twilio is really not this. Twilio was an API tier on top of it, but like the bandwidth.com, XO when they were still around, these were the huge CLECs, level 3 before it was acquired by CenturyLink and turned into Lumen. These are the big CLECs that were this like second layer. So there was phone company, and then there was this aggregator wholesaler, and then they had another aggregator layer, and then there might be another one on top of that, and then you have this like stack of like who knows how many kind of people in between point A, between you as a customer and the actual other side. And this is really easy, again, to hide in the voice world because you can't see that traffic. The only way that you see it is you see it in call quality and you see it in post-dial delay and PDD. So when we're engaged with clients that are serving a lot of voice traffic, whether it's a lot of voice traffic or a lot of SMS traffic or a lot of, they have a lot of DIDs, or they're trying to get to programmable voice, where they're interacting and doing text messaging at scale and interaction with scale, or maybe they're trying to do alerts, notifications, updates. Hey, your haircut's next week. Do you want to reschedule? These sorts of things. The trick that we do is just knowing what these aggregation tiers are between point A and point B in this chain, and saying, okay, if you're currently interacting here, the real value for you isn't to be here anymore. It's like, how do you get closer actually down to the metal? So when we talk, like I'll use a term from cloud computing, right? Like the farther abstracted you are, the less value you have, and the more middle, players that you have, and each player has to exert margin and take a cut out of it. So going from here down to here can produce a lot of value. The closer you get to the metal, the better off you are. The less other hands that are being fed or mouths that are being fed along the way, and the more influence that you have in controlling your own destiny. So this whole thought stemmed from this email. No, I'm not, nice people. There are no issues whatsoever in this message. And I'm sure there's a target market for this still. And it doesn't make sense for what I do. And I would tell my clients, like, I don't necessarily think this is the right path for you because there's other alternatives and other opportunities for you. If you still need a SIP trunking based product for a legacy on-premise PBX, let's take you and approach that slightly different. I'm not going to get you 0.001, on an enterprise user, with a couple hundred users, but if you've got 20, 30, 40, 50,000 users on your PBX, you still have a Cisco system, or you have a Avaya system or a Mitel system for whatever reason, that efficiency of scale exists for you. And those are places where we can help you a lot.